Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. As you know, in the news right now, there's a lot of talk about hantavirus. And I thought, who better to talk about that than Regina Phelps? Regina, welcome back.
Alex, it's you and I and diseases. I don't know, COVID, whatever. Here we are.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
looked
pleasure.
that up. We first talked about COVID back in October 2019.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes.
Wow. So let's start. I think you've got some slides you're going to share with us today to
Yeah,
give
I
some
think it's
information.
easier because it's a complicated topic. It's easier if I actually do talk about through slides. So
Okay.
let me just toss these up. I want to make sure you can first of all see them before I get too far along.
Yes.
Are we good? Okay. So what I thought I would do is just briefly talk through what the virus is, talk about the transmission possibilities, and also kind of get people grounded about what the overall risk is. So first of all, I'd be really curious. Had you ever heard of hantavirus before this?
I've heard the name a couple of times over the years, but it's really kind of something in passing,
Yeah.
never really a discussion about it.
Yeah, it's something that most people probably haven't heard of. It's actually there's about 40 actual recognized hantaviruses in nature, and they're kind of divided between the old world and the new world. So there's a different version, if you will, in Europe and Asia, and then there's the new world version, which of course is what we're actually really talking about today. There is lots of different varieties, again 40, but only a few of them actually cause severe disease in humans. And so we're talking about one of those today. These viruses are primarily transmitted through rodents, and that's usually like infected waste. So where people historically have been exposed to hantavirus has been actually things such as maybe cleaning out a cabin or cleaning out a shed. And what happens is that you're actually sweeping, you're causing dust to come up, and that's how a person is very commonly exposed to it. It's primarily occurring in the United States, basically west of the Mississippi, and it's in New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and California. So we have had it. I've been in all of those states, and we certainly have had outbreaks before, not of this particular version, but we have had outbreaks before in these areas. And again, it's people primarily creating a lot of dust. There's rodent feces in the dust, and people then inhale it. So that's how it's commonly transmitted. The one we're talking about today that causes this problem is called the Andes virus. And it's the only one that we know of that can cause human to human transmission, which of course should give everybody the COVID heebie-jeebies, right? When
Hmm.
you hear that word. But let's sort of break it down much farther because it's unusual, for several reasons. First of all, is the incubation period. I mean, it's between 1 and 8 weeks. The average is about
Wow.
56 days. So, I mean, that means you could be exposed to something and it could sort of percolate in you and you wouldn't know it. And that's pretty amazing when you stop and think about that. Most of the symptoms happen between this 2 and 3 week period, but it can go all the way to be 8 weeks. And the early symptoms will sound just like everything else you've ever had that's been kind of a cold, the flu, or COVID. Fever, fatigue, muscle aches, and those usually start appearing within the first 7 days of the illness. But in some cases, it takes 2 months to develop. So you might get it, you may have no symptoms, and then maybe 2 months later, all of a sudden you have, oh my gosh, I have the flu, or I've got something else, a respiratory illness. But it could be the hantavirus if you were in, and I'll explain that in just a little bit more. So I want to emphasize for everybody that's going like, oh my God, are we having to have another pandemic? And the answer is no. The chances of that are really, 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 really low because it requires close, direct contact in a confined space. So when you think about a passenger ship of 150 people in a small cruise ship, that's kind of a close, confined space with
Hmm.
people, again, sharing lots of air together, but also I'm right across the dining table from you. I'm seeing you in very, many different places. So the other time this has actually caused a fair number of illnesses was in 2018 to 2019 in Argentina. And it was actually the first time this was really documented as a person-to-person transmission, and it was very significant in that particular outbreak. So first of all, when you sort of think about, oh my God, should I panic? And you look at this, what do you think, Alex? You think like, oh, should I be panicking based on what I've just told you so far?
Um, I'm myself not panicking. I'm just more. I guess it's kind of hard not to compare things to COVID.
Correct.
So
Right.
I'm trying to think separately, and I can't
Mhm.
help but think, oh, there's the possibility of person-to-person transmission. Uh-oh,
Right.
right off the
Right.
bat. And that was the first thing that popped in my head.
Right.
And it's like, no, no, that's not what she's saying. You know, but it's hard not to think like that.
I totally
Yeah.
agree. And that's why I think it's important that we really parse this carefully. Because the other thing too that makes this very unusual is it does have a long incubation period. And today I was actually traveling. I was in an airport. I do wear a mask, by the way, every time I'm in an airport, every time I'm in a cab, every time I'm in an airplane. But again, as I'm walking through the airport, what am I thinking? I'm having that kind of flashback to the early days of COVID. And if you remember, starting around January, because the disease started actually in China the end of December, actually in November. By the time it got here, it was actually February. But again, it was starting to appear in many different places. So yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that. I was walking through the airport today. So, but it does require that I'm not just walking through and walking into a plume of air. I'm actually in a close proximity to somebody, and there's a fair amount of exchange of particulate matter, right, back and forth. So that's an important thing for us to all keep in mind so we don't lose our minds over this.
So could that include an airplane?
Yeah, sure. If you were sitting next to somebody, the people that have come back that were actually released from the cruise before they knew what was going on, there was a group of those, and you'll see the numbers here in a minute. Those people were in airplanes. They were, in contact with other people because of the way the ship schedule broke up. There was a group of people that left before this actually really became to be a big deal. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So there is that possibility of what's out there. So there's something called a hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, and that's what we're really talking about today. And this is a pulmonary event that occurs in this syndrome of hantavirus. So again, it takes 1 to 8 weeks after your exposure for people to be able to get symptoms. They usually occur between 2 to 3 weeks. So just keep that in mind. And remember, the exposure is to rodents, primarily dropping saliva or urine. This particular case does, however, have the possibility of human-human transmission. Generally, what happens, and this will sound very much like any kind of bad cold you've had or the flu, the initial symptoms are very flu-like. So weeks, you have your achy body, you've got fever, you've got muscle aches, you're tired. That's what it starts out with. In the Americas, though, the one we have is the one I meant. This pulmonary syndrome is actually a severe, I want to emphasize, severe and deadly disease, and it basically centers in the lungs, and it can be life-threatening. And in fact, the case fatality rate, Alex, is 38%.
Mhm.
It's like,
That's
if
high,
COVID would be 38%, that would have been 1 billion plus people easily dying in a short period of time, right?
right?
So that's the key thing is this is a lung disease versus the usual kind of hantavirus, and it actually has a death rate of about 38%. So it's a big deal. But again, it requires this close proximity. So this cruise ship that we're talking about, and essentially, this is important to sort of reflect on here for a moment. In this particular cruise ship, the outbreak was in this Dutch ship. It's a Dutch flag ship, Honduras or something. Do you know how to say it? I don't
Uh,
actually.
I'm not quite sure. Pronouncing it MV Hondas.
And behind us, I'll go with that. It's actually an expedition vessel, which primarily means it's going to go to the two poles, both the Arctic and the Antarctica. And it was on a polar expedition. So it was down essentially in the Antarctic region. So on May 2nd, there was a cluster of passengers on this particular ship that actually reported severe respiratory illness. And so that would be highly unusual, first of all, to have a large number of people that were reporting this. Now, there was 147 passengers and 34 crew that actually were on this, or pardon me, 147 passengers and crew on the ship, but 34 passengers and crew had previously disembarked. So that's the 34 people that were out in the public before this became a known thing. So that's that one that makes me sort of go like, oh, what about those 34 people? Now they have tracked down most of them, not
Okay.
all of them. So that means that those persons disembarked. They could have done sightseeing wherever they disembarked. They could have got on another plane. I mean, we don't know where they went,
I
essentially.
know there's a couple here in two for sure in Ontario and one in Quebec, and I
Oh,
know
really?
they were on that ship and they have been quarantined.
Hmm.
I think it's almost a week now they've been under watch.
Okay, so those were the ones that got out early then. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
good. And are they, did the government basically quarantine them or are they doing their own quarantining?
I'm not sure how that occurred. I just
Hmm.
know when the reporting came out, it said right off the bat, these people are quarantined. So I don't
Hmm.
know if they were mandated to do it or voluntarily did it.
Hmm.
That I'm unsure of.
Here in the United States, they are going to be quarantining all of them in a federal facility just to be able to keep their eyeballs on them and to make sure that they are doing the right thing ultimately. And so that's what's happening here. I'll be curious as to what other governments do around the world as this unfolds. So that's kind of where we are right now. These 47 people are, there's going to be these 34 people and crew have disembarked. Not all of them have been found. You have them in Canada, we have them in the United States as well. The current status of who has been infected, essentially, there's a total of 6 infections. Uh, Two died. Actually, there's actually three that have died now. And as you can see, four that were confirmed, one probable. And so there's a total right now of 8 cases, but 3 deaths. So that's significant, right? That's in that 30 plus percent,
Yeah.
38%. It basically matches the stats, 38%. So essentially, what this means is that this is a real deal. It is exactly performing as one would expect for the Andes version of this virus. And it's a concern for those who might be, again, in close proximity to individuals who have been exposed. But again, that number is low. Just keep that in the back of your mind. All 6 of these cases that have been confirmed were actually PCR tested, which, if that gives you a COVID flashback, it should, because that's the kind of testing they were doing with COVID initially. And so it was all confirmed, laboratory confirmed on a PCR test. So that's also good to know that we know exactly what we're dealing with. To really emphasize the importance of this issue is the risk to the public is really low. I know it's incredibly creepy the fact that we don't know where all of those people who disembarked early are, and we don't know who they sat next to and what happened, right? So there's that angst. So there's a lot of tracking that is going on to find what's happening with those individuals, where they might have been, how they got home, if they actually destined to home, did they have other trips that they were on, were they exposed to other people? So many governments now are working on this issue, as well as actually the World Health Organization is basically the group that's pulling all the data together. But still, the World Health Organization, the CDC, both believe that this is an absolutely low potential. And this will become more confirmed, if you will, once people have been tracked down and those people who have sat next to people or been in close proximity to them are all going to be basically quarantined. So it will take some time. It's not going to happen quickly.
Well,
But
yeah, because there's 2 months there, but potentially 2 months.
right, right, exactly. I mean, that's the other thing. Can you imagine if somebody came up to you and said, okay, Alex, you sat next to somebody that was on this ship. This is the deal. You sat on next to them on a plane, and maybe neither of you had a mask on, and you were blah, blah, blahing or whatever, just breathing the same air. They could come up to you and say, Alex, you're going to have to be quarantined for 2 months. I mean, that's what's going to happen in a variety of
Mm.
places around the world
Yeah.
based on this. And that's going to be, I mean, if that happened to me, I'd be like, oh my God, my entire life, 2 months, what are you doing?
I,
But
I do have one quick question
yeah,
based on what you were going through here. Is there a greater risk for the elderly?
That's a great question.
like COVID did. So I'm just kind of curious
That's a
if
great question.
this has an impact on the elderly more than younger or
Hmm.
anything like that.
Because this is not a frequent occurrence, there is no documentation about who actually is most susceptible. And
Mhm.
I guess that might be based on anybody's personal health profile. So let's say that maybe you're more inclined to get sick easily. Maybe you have a lung condition like asthma, or something like that. Maybe you might be more inclined based on whatever your exposure was to the person who actually became infected. So that's all up in the air. There's really no good data about this because thank God it hasn't happened very often.
Mhm. Okay.
So there is this low transmission risk. They keep emphasizing it requires very close contact. So that could be sexual partners, that could be people that are living in a household together, or it could be somebody, for example, like in a cruise ship where you're in very small places with people in kind of tight circumstances. And again, this was a small cruise ship, so it's not like one of these gigantic big boats. So it really isn't what we would all think about right now as a COVID-19 situation. It's not the start of a pandemic. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen before it becomes even a bigger issue than it is now. It spreads very differently than COVID did, as an example, or influenza, the flu. And so right now, the threat is really limited to those people that were on the ship, those people that disembarked from that ship early, and potentially people that might have been in close contact with those people. So maybe a partner or maybe something like that. So the CDC is going to be monitoring all the returning passengers in the United States, and they are going to be quarantined, forcefully quarantined in a federal facility. I believe it's in North or South Dakota. So the risk is low, but again, it's still present because we don't know what happened to all those people that disembarked, the 43. Now, the crazy people are already out. I just thought I would share that with you. Of course, you probably already knew that anyway would be happening, Alex. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of our crazy former congresswomen, who used to be a big supporter of Donald Trump, um, she actually was inquiring if ivermectin would work if somebody was exposed to this particular disease, hantavirus. And she happened to find some physician who says, as you can see very clearly, that hantavirus is an RNA virus and ivermectin should work. Now, as you look at the bottom, there's some context here that because hantavirus doesn't replicate in a nucleus, it doesn't mean that this probably would not work at all. However, I'm just pointing this out that crazy people are out, people are saying all kinds of things. And before you do anything, or try to get too excited about something, you should look at really credible information. So I would advise you people to look at the CDC, to look at, well, CDC has some problems, but the WHO. I would encourage that you look at even organizations like JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. They have a complete, a detailed set of articles on this virus already. So please don't follow somebody who's tweeting on social media about ivermectin.
Right. And don't drink bleach.
And don't drink bleach and don't have what was it, light shot into your body or something.
Yeah.
This is a very simple diagram, but it does it from the JAMA, which is a Journal of American Medical Association. And I do have a list of resources I think I've already sent you for you to include in the post of this that has some links. And so there's also some on the slide deck too. But again, what I would say is that please be inform yourself, read about it. Please read credible sources. I would avoid social media to your best, intention here, and really look at just reliable information. And the WHO is a really good source, but other medical associations like the Infectious Disease Society, Journal of American Medicine, et cetera, have really good articles on the hantavirus. So don't wander off. And in this particular slide deck, which you're going to place on the broadcast for this, there's a list of the documents that I've looked at that I referenced here today. So if you want to look at those, they're all available to you. And so just be aware that this is nothing to panic about, but it is something for us to all be concerned about enough to be informed.
Hmm. Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it so that
On
people
a
actually,
Sunday afternoon, right?
yeah, on Sunday afternoon here
Right.
is you get clarification on it because, as you said, some of the crazies are already out there. The conspiracy theorists are out there. We don't have the full picture of what hantavirus is,
Mhm.
so I wanted to get some of this information out to our viewers and listeners so that they are informed with some links that they can do their own follow-up as well,
Mhm.
that's credible, so that there isn't panic and we don't end up people going down a let's revisit COVID type situation.
Right, right. And that's because that is still so fresh in our mind.
Yeah.
And there are people, crazy people, posting things about things you should be doing or taking, that it's important for people to understand what the real risk is, to be informed as much as possible. And also because many of our colleagues might be asked by other people in their organizations, like, I heard about this hantavirus thing. Is it going to be like COVID? Are we going to have a pandemic? And it would be really good if everybody in our profession did a little reading, listen to this, do some additional reading, so that they have some basic knowledge. So if people are kind of, jumping off the bridge, so to speak, they can say, hey, take a deep breath,
Yeah.
and then talk about this. Because when people start hearing that the death rate is 38%, I don't know about you, but that scares the heck out of anybody.
Yeah. Well, I was actually, I'm glad you mentioned because I was going to ask you a question that is this something if you catch, the death rate that I saw was quite high, and I'm going, is this something we should worry about then? Because it looks like if you get it, you know what's going to happen.
Well,
So,
and that's the key thing about this disease is that there is no treatment for it. The only treatment that's available really is respiratory support. And then you just have to work through it. So there's no drugs, there's no treatment that's recognized. And so, this could be a case where somebody could end up on a ventilator. But what it does is it has a huge impact on the lungs. It is called a pulmonary syndrome. And so because of that, if someone was to actually get it and really become ill, there's a very big chance that you could end up on a ventilator in an ICU someplace. But
would
again,
you,
the chances are really small.
yeah, we're heading into cottage season, at least that's what it's called up here.
Yes,
Would you
same in the
recommend
United States.
would you recommend us wearing masks as people start opening their cottages, which is next weekend,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
just in case?
Absolutely. So, for example, in my career, I've lived in both Arizona and Colorado, and in those two states, there's a high amount of hantavirus that occurs. Not this version, but another kind, another of the 40 species, or the 40 different options. So, in that particular case, it's very common in the United States, like in New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, that people are sweeping out their cabins. They're cleaning out their areas, and there's been rodents there. And as they're sweeping, the dust comes up, they're breathing it in, and they get hantavirus. They don't die from it usually, from the version that is here in the United States. But this actually happened also in Argentina in 2018 and 19. And there were a large number of people that were affected, and a fair number of people died. I think it was like 35 or something. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a big deal. So yes, if you're actually cleaning up your cottages, you're opening them up, you're doing things like that, I would be wearing a mask, and I would be wearing a good mask, not a surgical mask. I'd at least wear a KN95 or an N95 to make sure that you're not getting any dust in your nasal cavities and sucking that into your lungs.
Yeah, it's smart to wear one of those when you're opening up your cottage and sweeping it all out because
Right.
it's just smart to do. Yeah.
Right, because rodents can get into any place, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's just another example of there's a lot of illnesses and diseases that could happen, and that we should, not be paranoid, but we should do the smart thing and protect ourselves in ways that we can easily. And such as wearing a mask when you're cleaning up and opening a cabin. That's simple.
Yeah. I am happy to hear that the risk is low.
Mhm.
That I'm happy to hear, and I'm sure many others are going to be happy to hear that too.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think, and again, we'll know more, but again, I think what's going to happen is because this has an 8-week cycle to it, on an average, an 8-week cycle before people can get ill and develop symptoms, that this is going to pop up in the news periodically. Now, I'd be surprised if no one got it else besides the ones that were infected. There might be somebody else on the crew or somebody else that left that boat that before the docking now in the Canary Islands. So I think what I would just say to people is, you're going to see it come and go. It'll come up in the news cycle. It'll be a lot this week, I'm sure, and then it will go down, but it may come up again. So just be aware, be smart, don't panic. And just, we all know the respiratory protection. If there was a reason for you to use respiratory protection, we all know what that is now
Yeah.
based on COVID. And so we know what to do. So don't panic is the key thing.
That's the perfect spot to end today's episode. Regina, thank you so much. I knew you were the best person to come on and talk about this.
Happy to do so, and happy Sunday, and go find some dinner, man.
I will. Thanks, Regina.
You're welcome, Alex. Take care.